pounding and shaking that a rodeo rider takes is tremendous. But someday, in this arena in San Juan Bautista, California, the riders and the crowd may get a shaking they never bargained for. Incredibly, the grandstand in which they sit is built directly on one of the world's most active earthquake zones, the San Andreas Fault System. The same system that once destroyed San Francisco. Here, as in thousands of other places around the world, we have deliberately, thoughtlessly built on or near areas that we know are vulnerable to earthquakes. That's asking for trouble. Earthquakes are the greatest natural destroyers of human property and life. They are part of the complex forces that continually shape and change the face of our planet and our lives. They are closely linked to the volcanoes that spew molten rock from the interior of our Earth, building and renewing our planet's crust. And they constantly remind us how truly fragile are the works of humankind, our roads, our buildings, and ourselves. Hello, I'm David Hedison. Welcome to Britannica Films' phenomenal world. We think of the earth beneath our feet as steady, solid, unchanging. But in reality, we live on the back of a restless, sleeping giant who tosses about in his dreams. Most of his tiny shudders we never notice, but sometimes our giant trembles so violently that the world we know literally begins to come apart. Concrete, glass, and steel twist and explode. Buildings fall. Highways are ripped apart. And people die. A major earthquake is absolutely devastating, not just for the physical destruction it causes, but because it also shakes one of our most unshakable beliefs, that we can trust the ground we walk on. Today, we'll explore the causes, the terrifying effects, and the ways we're trying to protect ourselves from this trembling earth. Los Angeles, California, home to more than 9 million people, and to many of the 1 million earthquakes that rock our planet every year. About twice every minute, our Earth trembles from the shock of a quake. Most of the tremors are too small to be noticed by anything but the most sensitive seismographs. But some are killers. And some of the most devastating, most violent earthquakes in human experience are still waiting to happen. 9 million men, women, and children live here with the daily reality that at any moment, an earthquake could tear their city apart. And yet, more and more people arrive every day to begin new lives in earthquake country. What would happen if a major earthquake were to strike Los Angeles? A partial answer was provided in the early morning hours of February 9th, 1971. For about a minute, the earth moved, jolting the sleeping residents awake. And when they stumbled outside, they were met with scenes of incredible devastation. The quake struck the San Fernando Valley, a few miles northwest of the city. Fortunately, it occurred just before rush hour, so there were few commuters on the freeways. Railroad tracks were twisted and buckled by the ground motion. Utilities, designed to withstand the impact of a quake, were nonetheless ripped apart. Communications, power, water, and gas lines were knocked out, interfering with emergency relief efforts. Property damage, $500 million. Injuries, 1,000 plus. Deaths, 64, from a moderately severe earthquake. The people of San Francisco know only too well what a really severe one can do. They remember what happened in 1906. San Francisco was virtually destroyed. From the rubble and ashes, a new, vital, and exciting city arose. Still, its people live with the constant threat of another quake as large or larger than the 1906 event. The danger to San Francisco comes from a gigantic fault, a boundary between two huge portions of the Earth's crust. It takes its name from the lake that it forms just south of the city. It is called the San Andreas Fault. It shows up clearly in central California's Carrizo Plain. Sometimes it is traced by a shallow depression in the landscape. Sometimes only a primitive road marks its passing. And sometimes it is a clearly defined line, slicing like a scar across the land. Altogether, the San Andreas Fault cuts through some 700 miles of California countryside. For millions of years, the fault has been in motion, and proof of that slippage takes many forms. These slick, highly polished rock surfaces mark the exact meeting place of two gigantic slabs of our Earth's crust. Construction often uncovers evidence of fault action. This road cut near the town of Gorman has exposed a mass of granite. Normally, granite is a strong, durable rock used in buildings all over the world. But here, the awesome grinding pressure and power of the fault has crushed it almost to a powder. Motion along the fault line may be sudden or slow, but it is inevitable. These dry stream gullies offer dramatic proof of that fact. They no longer flow in a straight line, but at the fault, veer sharply to the north. A model shows how the western side has been moving slowly northward in relation to the eastern side, where the stream crosses the fault. Slow movement along a fault produces a motion called creep. Through the years, the San Andreas Fault has redrawn this landowner's boundaries, but movement on the surface of our planet, whether slow or sudden, is only part of the picture. We must look inside the Earth to fully understand where and how an earthquake happens. When the strain along a fault becomes too great, the rocks fracture and slide. This deep point of rupture is the focus. Directly above, on the surface, is the epicenter. This is where the greatest damage is most likely to occur. The tremendous energy released by the sudden movement of the rock sends shock waves racing around the globe. Body waves travel through the Earth. The primary, or P waves, move faster in solid rock, but they slow down and change direction as they pass through the molten core of the Earth. As they change their line of travel, a shadow zone is created where the waves cannot be detected. Slower body waves, called secondary or S waves, travel only through solid rock. They cannot penetrate the Earth's core. The S waves will be detected in a smaller area, for they leave a much larger shadow zone of their own. Tracking the difference between the times these waves arrive will allow scientists to pinpoint the epicenter. Now it's the surface waves' turn. Some of these travel in a circular motion, moving things sideways. They are tremendously powerful and create incredible damage. As these twisted tracks demonstrate. Other surface waves move materials up and down, finishing the destruction the waves before them have begun. We'll visit the scene of one of the greatest earthquakes of modern times. Gediz, Turkey, March 1970. A major earthquake has totally devastated the town. Aftershocks hammer away, tearing down what was not destroyed by the initial quake. Survivors wander aimlessly, sifting through the rubble of their lives. Others dig to find those who may have survived the tumbling homes and buildings, and to recover the bodies of those who did not. Like San Francisco and so many other cities, this city is located near a fault. The fault shifted, and in 10 violent seconds, Gediz fell. Buildings in the village were not designed to be earthquake resistant. Narrow walls and heavy tile roofs crumbled and collapsed. The most basic necessities of life must be trucked in. Water and food, donated by many nations in a massive relief effort. Later, there will be time to repair the village's own power and water supplies. But for now, emergency measures are the only way to relieve hunger and prevent panic, disease, and starvation. Later, those who are homeless and orphaned will have to be cared for. We are vulnerable to the devastating effects of earthquakes, but not defenseless, and the battle goes on to improve our defenses. Scientists all over the world are studying the causes and effects of earthquakes, working toward the ultimate goal of being able to accurately predict when and where they will strike. The American effort is centered in the National Earthquake Information Service in Golden, Colorado. A map at Golden shows the epicenters of important earthquakes in the United States in the past year. They are not evenly distributed, here or anywhere else on the globe. By far, the largest number of quakes take place along clearly defined belts on the Earth. Many of these belts lie along the edges of large ocean basins and continents. These belts are also the site of most of our planet's volcanic activity. But why here, especially along the great undersea mountain ranges we call mid-oceanic ridges? Why should these areas so often be the places where earthquakes strike, volcanoes erupt, and mountains and islands are built and destroyed? It is because these belts are the borders of gigantic moving plates, slabs of rock that grind and slide past one another, floating on top of semi-fluid rock below. In the case of the San Andreas Fault, the Pacific and North American plates are both moving in a generally northwesterly direction, but at different rates. When they move suddenly and jump past one another, the shock is enough to level the city. In a race against time, scientists are trying to learn more about the San Andreas Fault system. One section of the fault north of Los Angeles has not moved in over 100 years. To measure the stress building up underground and its potential for disaster, a borehole is drilled 700 feet down into the fault. Fluid is pumped into a small section of the hole. As more and more fluid is forced in, the pressure builds. Eventually, enough fluid is pumped into the hole to fracture its walls. The measurements will provide important data about how the San Andreas Fault behaves under stress and may help scientists predict a coming earthquake. No fault system on Earth has been more intensively studied than the San Andreas. State-of-the-art technology, including high-powered lasers, are the tools of these scientists. Lasers can measure distance with incredible accuracy. In the foothills of the San Gabriel Mountains near Los Angeles, the United States Geological Survey has set up laser ranging stations. The installations will monitor even the tiniest movements along the fault zone. A laser is installed on one side of the fault, a target on the opposite side, and the distance between the two is recorded. If there is movement along the fault, the laser will be used to find the new target distance, and the amount of slippage can then be calculated. Other targets are used to refine and confirm the measurements. A team of seismologists from the California Institute of Technology have set up seismograph stations in the area called the Palmdale Bulge. Here, the fault has been locked in place for many years, and the crust of the Earth has been pushed upward because there has been no horizontal movement along the fault. At some point, something will have to give, and these scientists would dearly like to know what and when. Highly sensitive seismographs are partially buried and covered to reduce unwanted surface noise. Readings will be taken at regular intervals for many months. These stations and thousands of others in countries all over the world are further steps on the long road toward reliable earthquake prediction. An arsenal of technology is being brought to bear to achieve that vital goal. From the San Andreas Fault, hundreds of instruments pour data into computers that sift and sort information. Month after month, tremor after tremor, they build a graphic picture of present activity and give clues to activity yet to come. But earthquake prediction is only one battlefront in a much larger war. In laboratories, researchers work with models to determine the effects of stress and strain on different kinds of structures. How much stress will this bridge handle before it collapses? How big an earthquake can it take? These experiments lead to construction methods that make buildings more resistant to earthquakes. The Transamerica building in San Francisco is a striking example of a structure built to withstand the shock of a big quake. Shake tables are used to vibrate construction materials. Engineers learn which materials handle the greatest stress and, equally important, how to put them together to survive the shock waves of an earthquake. Another key element in reducing loss of life is increased public education. Knowing, if caught inside, to duck under a table or desk or stand in a doorway. Knowing, if caught outside, to get into the open, clear of buildings and power lines. But however prepared we may be, we'll never be free from danger. In Los Angeles alone, someday, tens of thousands of people may die when solid ground becomes trembling earth. We speak of solid ground, rock steady. Earthquakes change all that. We know much about earthquakes, but we must learn much more. And time is not on our side. To predict, perhaps to prevent earthquakes, is still a dream of the future. Meanwhile, we can only live with and try to survive the terrors of this trembling earth. For Britannica Films' phenomenal world, I'm David Hedison.